show, Frankie. I saw you pop in there a few minutes ago, and glad to have you as part of the show. So, welcome.
Hi, Chuck. Hi, Chuck. I'm so happy to be here tonight. Also, thanks to James, it was very interesting.
That part. Well, it was indeed. So, what do you have for us tonight, Frank?
Oh, Chuck. Good evening. Good evening to our beautiful audience. I hope you all are ready for some Frankie stories on this quiet night. To be honest, I'm a bit anxious because this month I chose a very provocative, sensual, and even sexual topic. And I want to make sure I deliver the message in a graceful way.
Well, I'm sure you will.
So today I want to talk about one of the most controversial and psychologically rich literary works of the 19th century, which is Venus in Furs, written by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch in 1870. The book that basically gave the birth to the term masochism. So, I will tell about the author a little bit. Leopold von Sacher-Masoch was born in 1836 in Lviv, then a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is now located in the Ukraine. He was born into a multicultural, multilingual household. His father was a high-ranking police official of Spanish-Austrian descent, and his mother was of the Ukrainian nobility. Sacher-Masoch grew up surrounded by culture, folklore, and also political upheaval. His early education was in history and law. He earned a doctorate from the University of Graz. But despite his promising academic career, he was a professor of history at the university. He gave it up to become a full-time writer. So from the start, Sacher-Masoch was obsessed with social justice, romantic idealism, and psychology of human relationship. He wrote dozens of novellas and short stories, often with historical or political themes, but his most lasting impact came from one work, Venus in Furs. He envisioned a literary series called The Legacy of Cain, which would consist of 6 volumes, dealing with themes like love, property, war, and death. And Venus in Furs was meant to be the part of the love volume. Ironically, it became the only part of his project that remains widely read today. So, what is Venus in Furs about? So, let me tell you a little bit about the plot. At its core, it is the story of Severin von Kuzemsky, a young aristocrat who becomes infatuated with a beautiful woman named Wanda von Dunaev. He persuades her to take him as her slave, literally, as a slave. So Severin wants Wanda to dominate him, humiliate him, treat him cruelly, and after some hesitations, she agrees. So they draw up a contract. Severin becomes Wanda's servant for 6 months, and she treats him with increasing coldness and violence, but actually fulfilling his erotic fantasies. Eventually, however, Wanda gets tired of this game, so she finds another man, the one who dominates her. And it ruins Severin's illusions, and he ends up a story, totally broken man, and now advocating the exact opposite of his former philosophy. The novel begins and ends with a framing narrative. Another man reads Severin's story, and at first he's inspired, but only to be warned against pursuing that path. At the center of Venus in First lies a profound psychological question. Why would someone desire pain? Severin, the main character, doesn't simply want to be hurt. He wants to be owned, to be made powerless, especially by someone whom he loves. But this isn't just sexual. It's metaphysical. Severin seeks transcendence through suffering, and he idealizes Vanda as a goddess, his personal Venus. He even says, to be the slave of a woman, a beautiful woman whom I love, whom I worship, that is the supreme happiness for me. But Vanda is not simply a dominatrix. She's Sacher-Masoch's vision of the powerful woman, the woman unshackled from morality and of domesticity. And she wears furs, a symbol of something primal, bestial, the symbol of some, maybe even violent strength. She's cultured, witty, and totally unafraid of her own power. And yet, she's still the product of a man's fantasy. The novel is aware of the paradox. Vanda, the goddess of Severin's dreams, becomes a reflection of his own desires, because in the end, she asserts the independence, but not by continuing this game, but actually by rejecting it. Venus in First was published in 1870, and we need to understand that at that time, the Europe was undergoing massive social and cultural shifts. And even though the sexual norms of the Victorian era were being challenged at that time, the repression was still basically the norm. Women were beginning to fight for greater rights. The idea of the new woman was being born and taking shape. And in art and literature, the 19th century was moving from romanticism to decadence. So these themes of perversion and even aesthetics of suffering were now open for discussion. But when other writers and artists used metaphor, Sacher-Masoch went further. He made private desire the subject of his work, of the literature. So when Venus in First was first published, it caused a sensation. Some readers were shocked, others fascinated, but it became clear that Sacher-Masoch tapped into something real, something enduring. Artists and writers across the 20th century, David Bowie and Lou Reed referenced it. There is a reason the phrase Venus in First continues to echo in music, film, and fashion. But perhaps the most fascinating legacy is this word, masochism. Today it's a clinical term, but it became as a literally one. That transition from fiction to psychology says a lot about the novel's power. So psychiatrists like Krafft-Ebing and later Freud would turn to this novel for insights into human sexuality. Richard von Krafft-Ebing, a 19th century psychiatrist, studied Sacher-Masoch's story in his 1886 medical text, Psychopathia Sexualis. He used Sacher-Masoch's name to describe a pattern of sexual behavior in which individuals derive pleasure from pain and humiliation, especially in a romantic and erotic context. Sacher-Masoch was furious about this. Of course, because he saw his work as a psychological exploration and not as some manual for perversion. To him, the psychological contact between dominance and submission was more of a metaphor for a broader imbalance of power, maybe with the imbalance of power between men and women in society. So right now we live in the age where conversations about consent, power dynamics, kink and gender identity are more open than ever. And Venus in First, even nowadays Venus in First feels extremely modern. The book dares to ask, what do we really want from love, from sex, from each other? And I think that the writer deliberately blurs that line between victim and master, desire and destruction, freedom and slavery. So I think in this sense, Sacher-Masoch was prophetic. He saw that human relationships are not governed by the reason alone, but rather by fantasy, fear, ritual, or maybe role play. There are also many works of art that saw light inspired by this brilliant novel. I'd like to talk about the band whose influence echoes through decades of music and art, the Velvet Underground. And in particular, their haunting and provocative song, Venus in Furs. Chuck, are you familiar with this song? Are you familiar with this song by Velvet Underground, Venus in Furs?
I don't think I know it. No.
Okay. Yeah. After some Frankie stories, you would definitely go and listen to it. To begin with, the Velvet Underground wasn't your average 1960s rock band. While the world was still swaying to the harmonies of the Beatles, maybe psychedelic swirl of the Grateful Dead, the Velvet Underground emerged from a very different place, literally and artistically. They were born in the New York City's avant-garde art scene, and their sound was raw, dark, and confrontational. Formed by Lou Reed and John Cale, the band was a product of contradictions. Lou Reed was a suburban kid with love for rock and roll, but also a poet fascinated by different topics, including urban decay, sexuality, mental struggles, while Cale, on the other hand, was a classically trained violist from Wales, immersed in minimalism and experimental composition. So when those two collided, they didn't just create music, they created art that was breaking the rules. Their 1967 debut album, The Velvet Underground and Nico, didn't sell many copies, even though it was produced under the patronage of Andy Warhol. But as Brian Eno, famous English musician and artist, once said, only a few thousand people bought that record, but everyone who did started a band. So it was definitely ahead of its time. Yes, it was definitely ahead of its time. It was a record that wasn't afraid to sing about addictions like heroin, gender identity, street life, and yes, sadomasochism. This brings me back to Venus in Furs, arguably one of the most striking and enigmatic tracks on that album. At first, Chucky, you will have to listen to it. And our audience, if you have never heard Venus in Furs by Velvet Underground, go on YouTube. It's mesmerizing. It's really brilliant. It's mesmerizing. So it opens with a slow hypnotic drone. It feels more like a march or a trance, something ancient and even pagan, and yet oddly futuristic. It's not catchy, but it's not even trying to be. I think it casts a spell. So then Lou Reed's voice enters, and it's detached, cold, almost disinterested. And yet, there is a tension beneath it. He sings,
Wow.
Shiny, shiny, shiny boots of leather, whiplash, girl child in the dark. So these are the opening lines that introduce us to a world of fetish, control, and submission. The song is directly inspired by the novella Venus in Furs, and Lou Reed, who studied literature at Syracuse University and was actually mentored by poet Delmore Schwartz, was deeply interested in such themes. The song is not just about the sexual fetish, it's about the complexity of human desire and how it often contradicts social norms. What makes the song so powerful is that it doesn't moralize. It doesn't ask the listener to judge or even to understand. It simply presents this strange, dark ritual of submission. The song becomes an exploration of identity. How far are we willing to surrender ourselves to someone? What does that say about love, of control, or even freedom? And of course, there is the cultural context. This was 1967. So America was knee-deep in flower power and Vietnam protests. So most of popular music was trying to offer either escape or revolution. And the Velvet Underground did neither. They looked at the underside of the society and said, this exists too. They wrote about people who were ignored, who were shamed or erased. And their work was radical, not because it was loud, but because they were really honest about what they were singing about. So Venus in Furs also reflects something deeply personal for Lou Reed. He was bisexual, and in an era where that was heavily stigmatized. His willingness to write about alternative sexualities and power relationship was defiant. The Velvet Underground gave voice to the marginalized long before it became common or acceptable in mainstream music. It's still challenging to talk about these days, to talk about such topics these days. Even I'm more anxious than I would normally be. Musically, the Velvet Underground innovated just as boldly as they did lyrically. Cale's use of the viola was groundbreaking. He didn't play it melodically, he used it to create texture, tension, and even dissonance. This wasn't rock and roll in the traditional sense. It was more noise art. You can hear echoes of this later in punk, post-punk, industrial, and even gothic rock. Bands like Joy Division, Sonic Youth, and 9 Inch Nails owe huge debt to this sound. Over time, the legacy of this song and the band only grew. David Bowie covered their songs, punk rockers worshipped them, and alternative music in general owes its very existence in many ways to the artistic risks that the Velvet Underground took back in 1967. They didn't just make music for mass approval. They even didn't want to be liked. They wanted to reflect the world as they saw it. Gritty, strange, disturbing, and yet beautiful. And Venus in Furs is perfect encapsulation of that vision. And even now, nearly 60 years later, their music still whispers, sometimes screams. The truth that most of us are too afraid to say out loud. Venus and First found new life in theater and cinema as well. A story that began as a 19th century novella was transformed into a 21st century play and then adapted into a thought-provoking movie. So in 2010, American playwright David Ives reimagined Sacher-Masoch's work in a play titled Venus and First. But Ives didn't simply retell the novella. Instead, he uses it as a play within a play. And this choice transforms the story into a dazzling experience that totally blurs the lines between fiction and reality, performance and truth. If you ever have a chance, if someone from our audience has a chance to watch it performed on stage in theater, I would strongly recommend. So here is the plot.
Wow.
A playwright and director named Thomas is holding auditions for his new play, an adaptation of Venus and First. He's so frustrated and disappointed by the actresses he's seen so far. Then, out of nowhere, a woman named Wanda enters the theater. Soaking wet from the rain, seemingly disorganized, late. She's loud, brash, and vulgar. Literally vulgar. Definitely not the cultured, intelligent woman Thomas had in his mind. But then something strange happens. Wanda convinces Thomas to let her read for the role. And as they begin acting out scenes from the script, the boundaries begin to dissolve. Wanda seems to know the entire script by heart. She embodies the character with stunning intensity. And gradually the power shifts from Thomas controlling the audition to Wanda controlling Thomas. By the end, the audience is left